So, without any more discussion, I'd like to introduce Aaron Mair, who is Sierra Club's 57th president. He became the Sierra Club member in 1999, following a decade-long battle that he led to shut down a polluting solid waste incinerator in an inner-city community in Albany. His efforts ultimately led to a commitment by the state to shut down the facility and provide a $1.6 million settlement award to that community. He was also a key figure in leading the fight and securing the Sierra Club's participation in the Clean Up the Hudson campaign, which resulted in a settlement between the EPA and General Electric to dredge toxic PCP settlements from the upper Hudson River. He's held more than 36 leadership positions with the Sierra Club's Hudson Mohawk Group and Atlantic chapter, including the chapter chair, chapter executive committee, and the environmental justice chair. He was elected to the Sierra Club National Board of Directors in 2011, and I guess because he had too much time on his hands, he decided to then become president. Throughout his tenure with the club, Aaron has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to grassroots action, environmental justice, and transforming the culture of the Sierra Club to make it, in his words, a more welcoming environment to all people, regardless of their race or socioeconomic status. And just so you know, Aaron had two choices of where to go today. One was here, or the other one was to be at the UN for the signing today. So I think it's pretty impressive that he came to join us, and please join me in welcoming Aaron Mair.
Since my clock keeps cutting off, but somebody can just flag me right around 15 minutes, and so I'll begin my rambling stream of conscience. But again, thank you. It is indeed an honor to be here. When we talk about being a grassroots organization and showing leadership of what matters and elevating the grassroots, again, today, who would not want to be at the UN at the signing of one of the most significant climate agreements the planet has known, because of the sense of urgency being now, or being with the grassroots talking about movement building. I think that a lot of folks, if they got their priorities wrong, they would choose that event. But here, movement building is something that's critical and core. We only have this one planet. And to the extent that I have an opportunity to be at a law school, to talk to future thought makers, existing activists, community leaders, government officials, on how we can collaborate and come together because of this urgent crisis. The issue that I have, in spite of Sierra Club's humongous work, and I don't ever want to belittle or undermine that humongous work with regards to climate change and COP21. We have been in it from the beginning. We have been leaning on them from the beginning. But more importantly, not only doing that, but as you know, our famous battle against coal and shutting down the coal plants across this country, and really leaning in and being that market force and change. The real big issue about COP21 is that it's an agreement. It's not a treaty. And the problem with it being an agreement versus a treaty, the treaty, as you know, has a force of law. It has real metrics and real things that nations must do. Treaties transcend sovereign states' sovereignty by definition. It puts it on a par of mutual, as they say, dependence, but also mutually assured action. And coming up with less than a treaty is, as I would say, a cop-out. And so folks who've heard me give my cop-out talk, it's shame. Our hair should be on fire. We just saw the news, if not yesterday, today it's been breaking, because of the superheated Pacific Ocean, with the El Nino effects. As you know, the Great Barrier Reef off Australia is almost 95% bleached. That's huge. Add to that the rapid thawing and expansion, as they say, again, the freshwater melt with regards to our Arctic poles, and the rapid thawing and melting of Arctic ice, the polar ices, the amount of krill, which are essential for life in the oceans, are decreasing. So just the food supply for the seafood chain, from everything from coral, which are very important, to krill, which are very important. So coral in the tropics as a food supply for fish in a fish web, as well as the krill at the poles. And so when we see the collapse of the food supply for most marine animals and mammals, this is reasons for your hair to really be on fire, and why the flawing and applauds over a signing of an agreement is just not enough. It's just not enough. And the need to build this movement and the need to shock America into action is dire. Because again, the drag on this not being a treaty and the fact that it is an agreement is because of our failure of leadership. The United States is one of the most significant global players and global leaders, but it's also one of the significant consumers of global natural resources. You know, we are not only global resource hogs and pigs, but we also have a huge, massive carbon footprint. And more importantly, we lead the globe in climate science deniers. Now, there's a guy that's out there that one president called lying something, and y'all probably seen my famous debate with him, but it's true. And it was not really a debate. Because a lot of folks say, well, we saw you, he handed your hat to you on YouTube. I go, well, that's YouTube. But it's a hearing. Most of you here as attorneys know what a hearing is. I submitted over 50 pages of testimony on why government needs to increase regulations to protect communities that are right now frontline, fence line communities that are suffering under the weight of climate change, but also industrial pollution. And most of these are low income, poor, predominantly minority, or First Nation communities. So that was the reason why I was there at the hearing. And he went into a footnote citation on page 40 about the reference of 97% scientific consensus, which actually I was wrong because it's actually increased since then. But that being said, he wanted to use that to derail it and go into that point. But as you know, once you submitted sworn testimony, you're under oath. So when I'm there testifying to the fact and not wavering from the fact, that's not weakness. It's not a debate society or a shout down. For the small mind, for what I call the beer hats, it's an in-your-face moment, but that's not what the issue is. We have a crisis, and we have a senator who's in one of the most powerful nations on the face of the earth before the globe saying that our NASA scientists are a bunch of hacks, that the Union of Concerned Scientists are a bunch of liars, and more importantly, things are actually getting cooler in spite of the evidence, the overwhelming meteorological evidence that the earth has been systematically warming. And so to have our leaders and our politics held hostage, we must enlist and mobilize the population. So much so that I've reached out to union leaders, civil rights leaders, all those frontline community leaders that we came together through our democracy initiative, and as part of the march on DC with regards to Democracy Awakening, we basically risked breaking the law. It was the second time in Sierra Club's history to get arrested to push for a functioning democracy. Because at the end of the day, we're a nation of laws. And when one branch of government ceases to enforce, enact, or follow the law, then what's in action right now under the current framework must be challenged. So the unjust inaction must be met with just action. And so myself and a number of civil rights, in fact, some of you here, how many here were in D.C.? I think there was a couple. And you have an activist right here that were arrested in calling for our Congress to do its job. It's that simple. We have treaties, we have actions that need to be taken. The Clean Power Plan right now is being held up in limbo. There you go. And so these are things that action must be taken on. And so the gridlock, they call it gridlock, and let's be crystal clear. We haven't seen anything like this since 1860, in the 1860 race where we had President Lincoln. We haven't seen action like that. And what was the issue then? Whether or not people of color will be freed and whether or not the institution of slavery would be ended. And it's not a coincidence that you have an African American president sitting there and you have the most blatant nullification and obstructionism that we haven't seen in over 150 years. The irony is not lost. It is what it is. All the more reasons why we must transcend color, background, orientation, and set that nonsense aside and come together to build this movement. And I came to the Sierra Club when I was fighting the toxics, as you heard a little bit of my resume. What motivated me, just like most parents or anybody, is the NIMBY aspect. It was in my backyard. And when two of my daughters were diagnosed with environmental asthma, as a father defending his child, or any parent defending their child, I was forced to take action. So not only did I take action, I was forced to take on the party that was responsible for that. It happened to be the state of New York running what it was called then a solid waste to energy incinerator that powered the entire government complex. In short, I had to sue my boss. And this is, again, leadership. And when it comes to your family, your community, when you see lives on the line that are impacted, you have a choice. Are you silent because of a profit or a dollar to be made? Or do you take action to save those you love, the community you love, your family you love, your children you love? So generalize it to now, I'm fighting for this very planet that I love, because we don't have an alternative planet, and we don't have an alternative food supply, no matter how inefficient we are about producing and living off the land here. I mean, we rely on Walmart and everything else, but still at the end of the day, we have a huge energy footprint. And what this requires us to do more and more is depend upon burning fossil fuels. So one of the things that I had to do then as now was take a step up to take an action, but more importantly, okay, 2 minutes, to be that face of change and take the risk. And so then as now, I'm glad I won. I could have been probably in another profession if the boss got tired of me. But at the end of the day, I think Governor Cuomo, which was Mario Cuomo, saw in his heart that I may disagree, and this guy may have embarrassed me, but I'm going to end up still doing the right thing because this community is bearing the brunt. Fast forward to COP change, COP21, it is now moving the Sierra Club in that vein. When I first went to the Sierra Club, when it came to that plant and that incinerator, give me 2 more. The first thing, I figured that they would be welcoming a person who's battling toxic, who's battling solid waste, who's battling burning garbage as a way of producing energy. I figured that they would be receptive. At least a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine who invited me to present to the Sierra Club to get assistance, believes so as well. When I went to the Sierra Club, the first thing that I entered into, it was in Lower Manhattan, of all places, one of the most diverse cities, which at that time probably had about a 65% minority population, multi-ethnic population in New York City. So imagine me going into a room and it was literally a sea of white folks, which was interesting. This was the Sierra Club Atlantic chapter. And so I had to go and present my case. But as I was going up to make my case, as folks are coming up and greeting you and saying hello, I was asked, why am I here? Not, what is your name? Or where are you from? Why are you here? And after I made my case, some of the questions that came up, but the one that stuck out most in my mind, well, why did you go to the NAACP? So when people of color have an issue over the environment or toxics or fuels, they got to go to some ethnic organization. And mind you, this was at the height, actually the middle arc of the environmental justice movement. So, in other words, what they were saying is that black folks or Hispanic folks who have an issue with toxics or pollution should not be seeking out the environmental organization. By the way, the environmental movement, this is Earth Day. And the entire movement of Earth Day, its tactics, its strategies, came from the civil rights movement. So, it's fascinating for something that borrowed our tactics to win huge environmental successes, which we all should be grateful for. I'm being told to go. And that, to me, it hurt. It stung. I was voted down, by the way. And I vowed never to go back. But my friend who brought me there, it was a long 3-hour ride up the Hudson River Valley, back to Albany. And he spent that whole time in tears and just praying and just apologized. I said, Roger, for God's sakes, man, that's not you. I'm not judging you by what they are. I said, brother, I appreciate your heart that you tried to help and bring me to a source of help. Now you're just seeing how high the battle is and how high a mountain we must climb. I says, don't worry, brother. I said, it's not a thing. I says, we will do what we got to do. And we did what we had to do, and we won. NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, Francis Beinecke out of Yale, and a bunch of other folks stepped up, got our backs, and we won. We went on to beat that plant. We won, and then not just beat, because that's the other issue. A lot of folks in low-income communities, they beat something, they feel that they won. I go, no, we want justice, because they denied us the right of equal treatment and equal protection under the law. And that's what justice is about. It's not about separate stuff for blacks. It's about making sure blacks, whites, anybody gets equal treatment under the law. That's why you're studying the law, right? Because at the end of the day, by the grace, not of God, but of law, should we be defiled, burned, harmed because of the failure to practice law, then everybody is cheapened and everybody is at risk. So, pushing that justice lens and argument, Roger came back to me like about a week later, and the local group, and this is when I learned that there's different levels within the Sierra Club, because everybody says Sierra Club and they think it's a monolith. It's really a balkanized thing of literally, hundreds of groups, chapters, and the national, and we quarrel like cats and dogs. But it's a beautiful quarrel, because the dialectic at the end of the day is that we come out with one voice and we save the planet. But the beautiful thing in that instant was I learned the power of a group in action. It's your backyard. So the Hudson Mohawk group got our back. They actually passed the hat, created our first foundation account for our community, and our first campaign sign of a pregnant woman with her child in the shadow of the incinerator with an umbrella with our campaign goals. Now, I was moved to tears when I said that these activists can come back and set aside what the state chapter failed to do. I said, this is where this is something here. And by the way, I did reach out to the NAACP, and I was waiting for them to get back to me. So the first person through the door was the first person who invited me out the door, but he came back with justice. And I told him, I said, you know something? Because of your action, I am going to join the Sierra Club. I'm going to become a member of the Sierra Club. And as a national leader at that time in the National Environmental Justice Movement, I told them I will work to transform that racist culture. That's right, I said it, racist culture, and make sure it becomes a just culture. That no other group, no other entity, because of their status, poverty, condition, orientation, or where they come from, would ever be turned away. That the issue relative to the environment and its threat to humanity is one of the things that would come first before we decide to act or not to act. But all their conditions. So fast forward, we create the Sierra Club's Environmental Justice Committee. It's Diversity, Equity, Steering Committee. And almost in 2.5 decades, we literally have been transforming the culture of this organization, not by polite acts, but by demands, examples, and action. And now I am proud to say we're the first national environmental organization. Yes, we are now. I guess we can say an environmental justice organization, but an environmental organization that's hired its first executive director for diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, none of the other major green groups have that executive level post. But more importantly, before we hired the person, we had to make sure that the culture, the norms, and the values were not taught, but written into our policies and our rules and our bylaws. And so within that 2.5 decades, we transformed, we did a lot of gutting of that old culture and stripped it down and rebuilt it right now to the point where I think it's one of the leanest, meanest, but deep greenest environmental organizations for justice and global equity. So that is a bit of our story, but I guess we'll probably save the chat for climate stuff and COP21 stuff because I'm over time. But I figured that was important for you to hear because many people assume that this is a token appointment. The Sierra Club is a grassroots organization. So you have to run on your actions, your deeds, and the content of your character. So I was elected from the grassroots to its state level, to its national level, by the walk I walk. The talk comes after, but any of you know me, I'm tenacious, as they would say. I guess that we'll leave it at tenacious. But we're dead serious about saving this planet and dead serious about building a diverse movement, because we cannot save the planet with the hate speech that you see coming out of the mouth of some politicians. We cannot save the planet without a UN-type effort domestically and internally and transcending all the contradictions. But more importantly, we're a nation of laws. We cannot save the planet without schools like Vermont School of Law producing some of the meanest, greenest, kick-ass environmental attorneys that this country can ever have.